You're listening to The Back 40, the podcast for Ontario farmers, covering topics and issues that matter most to Ontario agriculture. Brought to you by Trillium Mutual Insurance, bringing the ag community together one podcast at a time. I'm the host of The Back 40, Mike Brine, agribusiness specialist at Trillium Mutual Insurance. If you go back many years ago when I was in school, one of my professors made the point that in Canada we have for agriculture no natural advantages. Our climate is colder than the US, we have shorter growing seasons than the US, we have a smaller market than the US. So there's nothing really here that would give us a competitive advantage anywhere. And certainly that short growing season is a challenge when it comes to things like fruits and vegetables. And on a regular basis during the winter months, we find ourselves importing from other countries, particularly the US. A lot of people would like to change that. We'd like to see ourselves become self-sufficient during the winter time. And there is a challenge out there right now for some people to try to do something about that. We are speaking today with Tamara Rebanks, and we're going to be talking about the Homegrown Innovation Challenge. Tamara, welcome to the Back 40.
Thank you, Mike. It's my pleasure to be here.
So fill us in on a few of the details here. What exactly is the Homegrown Innovation Challenge?
The Homegrown Innovation Challenge is a $33 million initiative that the Weston Family Foundation has launched, and we hope it will unleash the creativity and ingenuity of some of the brightest minds in this country to address that problem that you just indicated we have in the introduction, that our harsh climate makes growing local agricultural production difficult most of the year.
So where did the idea come from?
In 2020, in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, we looked around and thought, what can we do to make Canada more resilient to some of these macroeconomic factors that we saw impacting us during the pandemic? So things like supply chain disruptions, currency fluctuation, and inflationary pressures, and increasingly the impact of climate change. And we learned by speaking to more than 60 experts around the globe that the majority of our imported fruits and vegetables come from the US, as you said, and we import more than 80% of our fresh fruits and vegetables. Now, that was certainly a surprise to me because having just come through the summer, I know how much local produce we do produce. But that definitely tapers off as fall comes in. And by January, February, we have almost no local production. And our production, we're heavily dependent on a couple of places in the US, mainly California, which is currently suffering from one of the worst droughts of in a millennium, we're told, and Arizona too, which is again also a place has severe droughts at times. So when we learned about these vulnerabilities, it made us all think about what we should be doing to become more resilient.
Yes, and when we compare ourselves to a place like California or Arizona, we may not have very many natural advantages, but one of the things that we do have here is we do have water. And that is becoming increasingly throughout the world. That's becoming a restricting factor on what we're able to do. Are we in a situation here where at some point this may become more than just it'd be really nice to, but we may really have to because there won't be enough produce available?
I think we're already at that point, Mike. I think this is something that we need to address as soon as we can. And we feel a real urgency, which is why we put such a large amount out there. And also, one of the things we heard in our conversations, yes, we have a harsh climate, but so do many countries. There are many countries that have cold climates. There are also many countries that have incredibly hot climates. And yet, Canada has a tradition of tremendous agricultural production in a lot of crops, less so in fruits and vegetables. So we have great farmers, we have great growers, we have a very stable regulatory framework that is respected around the world. And we have a superb university and college system to generate ideas. So we were actually very well situated to solve some of these problems and also to test things out that would be applicable around the globe.
Living in southern Ontario here, we sometimes lose sight of the fact that, yes, there's a lot of fruit and vegetables that are produced in southern Ontario, but you get outside of our area and into other parts of Canada, and it's not nearly so plentiful. I know we visited Calgary a few years ago, and I was surprised at the lack of Canadian produce there, and it was in summertime, but they simply don't grow as much as we do. And if you go to places like the Yukon, it's really hard to grow anything.
And also, it's very expensive. And I think this is something that most Canadians are incredibly aware of right now is the cost of food and how much what's going on globally influences our cost. And so how much better would that be if more of food was produced here in Canada and so it didn't have to travel hundreds of miles to feed people. I mean, you're absolutely right. If you go up to the Northwest Territories or even northern Saskatchewan, Manitoba, the cost increases dramatically because the food has to be imported so far and moved far away from its site of production. Just to go back to one of your other points, Mike, I mean, living in Southern Ontario, you're very aware that we already have a good greenhouse production system, particularly in Leamington, Ontario. So Canada is already good at growing some products in greenhouses. And what this challenge hopes to do is to think about how we can grow more and extend the growing season to produce more of our food in those times of the year when it's difficult to grow outside.
And I think that kind of leads into one of my questions, which is why not just expand our greenhouse industry? Why do we need a challenge here? We do have a good greenhouse industry in Ontario, as you said, but there must be a reason. What's the reason for the challenge from that perspective?
We have an excellent greenhouse system, but it currently grows a limited range of crops. And those crops, it is always more expensive to grow things indoor than outside because you have to pay for electricity to heat and cool greenhouses. You have to pay for lighting. And when you're growing things in greenhouses, there are implications on the pests that get contained in the greenhouse. Though we have good greenhouses, they're certainly not spread around the country. And the things that are grown in them are not as cheap as they would be if they're grown outside. So when we looked at this, we thought we can do better. And certainly, if you develop a system that addresses the energy, lighting, and heating and cooling system in greenhouses and gets the cost down and develops a system that is more cost effective and extend the growing season indoors, that could be a benefit not only to Canada, but it could be sold around the world to other countries who are trying to address this too.
Not just sell the produce, but sell the technology itself.
Exactly.
So, how exactly does the Homegrown Innovation Challenge work?
Unlike traditional grants that require a big upfront bet, a challenge office offers rewards based on outcomes, with a final prize to whoever can first or more effectively meet a defined challenge. And we're not judging how you get there, but just what we want the end goal to be. So, our challenge statement is as follows: we're inviting innovators to create and deliver a market ready system that reliably, sustainably, and competitively produces berries out of season and at scale in Canada. So that is a big statement with a lot of elements in it. And really, we're not particularly interested in berries. They're really a means to an end because if innovators can address the challenge statement, they will have catalyzed a range of solutions relevant to other crops too, we think. And if they can do it in a cost effective way, this will bring down the price of healthy and sustainably grown food for all Canadians.
So it is something that will translate. So they're growing berries today, but this might translate to something like lettuce as an example or something along that line.
So already we've extended the growing season of leafy greens, so lettuces, tomatoes, herbs, but berries are the next step. And after that, it's tree crops. But if you can grow a berry, and by the way, I learned how broad the definition of what a berry is, but for our purposes, a berry is something that most Canadians would identify as a berry: a strawberry, blueberry, blackberry, Saskatoon berry. We have some wonderful native berries in Canada, but not a cucumber or a pumpkin, for example, which are
Right.
also berries in a botanical definition. And we've tried to pick berries that are grown in the same way. So, for example, a cranberry would not be eligible in this challenge because it's grown in bog, whereas blueberries and raspberries and strawberries are all grown in the same type of soil.
Right. So your Homegrown Innovation Challenge, who all can take part in this?
So, we're seeking multidisciplinary teams, and we really believe that this is something that people are going to have to collaborate together on, but it has to be led by a qualified donee. So that means, for example, it has to be led by a university or college, but some organization that has a charitable registration number to lead the team. In addition to university researchers, for example, you would need a farmer or a grower to help test the crop in the field or in the greenhouse. You'd need someone who understands energy usages. You'd need an entrepreneur who's going to understand pricing. And we think that lots of people are going to have to collaborate. And that's what we wanted. We didn't want a lone brilliant mind to develop this and this to go nowhere. We want this to be, at the end of the day, at the end of the challenge, ready for the products to be sold to Canadians.
When you start talking about a market ready system, there's a lot of moving parts there that have to be developed. It's not just whatever medium or whatever spot they're growing them in. And it's not just about the genetics. It's also about how do you market, how do you move it, how all of that stuff works together.
Exactly. This is a complicated problem, and we understand that you may be missing a part and you may need help. And so I want to also emphasize that the Weston Family Foundation is here to help connect people too. And if you think you have an idea or would like to take part in this challenge, you can email us at challenge@westonfoundation.ca, and we'll help introduce you to other people who are also working together and put you together with the team.
We'll let you put that out again at the end here. So, in case somebody who is listening is interested in this, we'll definitely put that up one more time. Uh, so, how is this structured? When you start talking about this challenge, it isn't just a free for all, everybody starts and finishes. How have you structured the challenge?
Right. The challenge is going to progress over the next 6 years and culminating in the winners being announced in the spring of 2028. So currently we're in the spark phase, which goes until December 20th of this year, when teams are coming together to develop their ideas. We gave out $750,000 in June to 15 teams from across Canada to help them develop their proposals for the December deadline. And after December 20th, the door is closed. No new teams can enter the competition. So that's a really important date. In March of 2023, we'll announce the 10 teams who will receive $1 million each to develop their proof of concept in what we're calling the shepherd phase. And they have 1.5 years to work on this concept. In December 2024, 4 teams will then be selected to move to the scaling phase. They will each receive $5 million to develop their innovation to farm scale. In 2028, the final prizes will be awarded, and they are 1 million to the overall winner and 1 million to the technology breakthrough winner. We're really excited by already the potential that we're seeing out there.
Is your organization in need of funding for a capital project? Trillium Mutual's Roots Community Fund provides funding towards projects such as renovations, expansions, and equipment purchases that support rural Ontario. Roots helps ensure that these organizations will remain a crucial part of the local community. To learn more about Roots, including how to apply, visit our website at trilliummutual.com and click Community at the top of the page. You're going to push through four really good ideas right through to the end here, but you've got at this point 15. It's a really great opportunity to develop some of these ideas that even if they don't make it through into that final four, there's a lot of these could see some sort of adaptation out there in the industry anyway, and this is a really good start for them.
Absolutely. I mean, this is what's so exciting. We feel that there won't be just one or two winners at the end of this. There are winners all along the way because we're going to be working with them to connect them with potential investors, people who can help them with their develop their ideas further, and generally try and get the word out there that this is an important space for entrepreneurs and just bright minds, that we all Canadians need more people involved in the food space and thinking of how to grow more healthy and sustainable food.
So when we get to the end of the challenge in 2028, what sort of criteria is used to judge who is the winner? Is this strictly an economic thing, or is it an environmental aspect to it as well? Or how do you determine that?
It's a combination of those elements in that challenge prize statement. So, who has produced the most reliable system? Who is growing the food in the most sustainable way and at a price that is competitive? Who has extended the growing season the most? I mean, and who can best do this at scale? So, not just test it in one greenhouse, but do it in multiple greenhouses or fields in different growing seasons.
And how adaptable is it? Is this something that is specific to one area that has a certain characteristic, or can we do this anywhere around the world?
Exactly. I mean, it's very different when you're pricing growing something in Quebec, which is very low electricity rates compared to other parts of Canada. But can you do this effectively in Northern Ontario or up in the Northwest Territories? These are questions these innovators are going to be asked. And we feel that even if they don't get all the way on every aspect, we just have the potential to make some large breakthroughs in many different areas.
In fact, it's highly likely they won't be able to solve all the problems there. I mean, that some of these are going to be, yes, they really work well in this area with this particular criteria, but in other areas they may not work at all. Different problems in the different areas that these may not solve in those.
Well, I'm optimistic, Mike. Having seen the 15 proposals come in June, there are some truly exciting ideas that Canadians have about how to solve these very difficult problems around growing food in harsh climates. So I'm optimistic.
It should be interesting to see what they come up with. I'm certainly looking forward to it, and I'm not that patient a person. So the fact that I have to wait 5 or 6 years is nah, that you know, I'd like the answer now. I think most of us would like the answer now, but it's a far more reasonable time frame when you consider the way cropping works. I mean, it's hard to develop something and say, okay, we're going to try this, and it takes sometimes 6 months to figure out whether or not it works.
And berries take longer to grow than a lettuce plant does. So it's a difficult challenge, but this is why we spaced it out over 6 years to give people enough time to develop their ideas.
We've talked a little bit about the criteria of what the winning challenge will have to be up against. Who makes that determination? Who are your judges?
So, Mike, we've got an excellent panel of judges from around the world, and we assembled them because we want to make sure the best ideas that are being developed in Canada have not been produced elsewhere. And these truly are innovative ideas. So we have two judges from the US, and one is an energy expert and one is a specialist in plant genetics. We have someone from Germany who's worked around the globe looking at innovation in this particular space. We have a judge from the United Arab Emirates who was tremendously excited to get involved because he said so many of the problems that Canadian greenhouse growers face are exactly the same as growers in the United Arab Emirates face, except instead of cold and how to grow in the cold, how do they grow in extreme heat? So for him, the idea of growing in a harsh climate resonated tremendously. We also have a couple of Canadians, Dr. Jennifer Grentz from the University of British Columbia and Dr. Evan Fraser from Canada, who are just there to make sure that our international judges understand the Canadian context that our participants face. And then leading our judging panel is Dominic Barton, who wrote the Barton Report that some of your listeners may have heard about, that really showed how Canada has the potential to lead in the agricultural space. So he was a huge supporter from the start of this challenge prize and the way in which Canadians had the potential to develop ideas that then could be shared around the world.
It's a very diverse group of individuals. I know that we've had Evan Fraser on our program here. He was one of the authors of Dinner on Mars. And I found that in itself a fascinating thought process that we went through there. And it dealt with many of the same issues that we're going to be dealing with this particular challenge, which is growing food in a harsh environment.
That's exactly true. And Evan helped us develop this challenge along the way and was instrumental in really pushing us to do this. I would also add that if you go to our website, homegrownchallenge.ca, you can see on it all the judging criteria that the judges will be using. So we try and make this process as transparent as possible for any participants so they know exactly how much weight will be put on different elements of the judging process and where to put their energy.
So the Weston Family Foundation is driving force behind this. What is it about this project that really catches their eye that makes them want to push this idea?
Well, the Weston Family Foundation has been involved in giving back to Canada for more than 60 years. It was started by my grandparents, Reader and Garfield Weston, and the foundation's goal is to invest in innovation and learning to deliver measurable impacts for the well being of Canadians. So, we do that with working with a number of forward thinking partners to advance Canada and create lasting impact. In all our grant making, we look for a specific problem that is out there and then try and work out if we are the right ones to address it. And in this case, we thought we were. We're all passionate about growing and producing healthy food. We already are working in healthy landscapes and people through other areas of our foundation, and growing healthy food seemed to fit perfectly in between healthy people and healthy landscapes.
So, just to be clear on this, and a lot of people will associate the Weston name with the food industry, particularly the grocery retail industry there. This is not something that the winner is going to automatically be rolled into the Weston family of selling. This is something that's going to be out there for the industry to use at large. Am I correct?
Absolutely. I mean, the intellectual property that's developed will belong to those who've developed it. It won't come back to the Weston Foundation at all. And in fact, we mandate that whatever is grown, it has to be grown first in Canada for the benefit of Canadians, and it has to be sold as broadly as possible. It could not just be sold by one retailer, for example, and locked up. We want this shared as widely as possible because we know this has the potential to provide good, healthy food for so many Canadians. And that really is the purpose of this. It's not for us to benefit in any way.
I mean, ultimately, if you come up with a saleable product, the grocery industry is going to benefit from it. There's just no way around that. So it's good to hear that that's going to be available to hopefully to all Canadians, that this is something that's going to be particularly widespread.
Absolutely.
So we've talked a little bit about why the Weston Foundation is involved in this. What is it in particular, though, that gets you involved in this? Why is this so important to you personally?
Well, my career to date has been focused on grant making, both in the not for profit as well as the for profit sector. And Until recently, I worked for nearly 20 years in our family food company, George Weston, developing community engagement and grant making programs. So I understand the problems in the food sphere very well. And I'm also excited that what we can do in Canada to be leaders globally in solving some of our food problems. So I'm here today representing the Weston Family Foundation, but I've been heavily involved in the charitable space almost all my career and speaking to farmers and growers and researchers. I'm just tremendously excited about what we can do together as Canadians to solve some of these problems.
So, what other types of projects is the Weston Family Foundation involved in?
So we champion world class health research and innovation with the same passion that we support initiatives that protect and restore biodiversity. So, for example, in aging, we're looking at strategies to catalyze and scale science based approaches to improve the health of Canadians. And we have a healthy ecosystems focus that aim to restore and protect biodiversity on Canada's wildlands, agricultural lands, and urban landscapes.
So there's a fairly wide spectrum of things that you get involved in, but they all tend to deal with the well being of people when it comes right down to it.
That's correct. We're really focused on the well being of Canadians as our specific area of focus.
So, as a response to this, you mentioned you've had 15 different groups that have expressed an interest in this that you've given out grant money to. What types of projects are they working on? What sort of ideas have they come up with?
We've had someone suggest that they could grow berries in an underground berry farm. So they're looking at growing food in mines across Canada. And as you may know, we have many kilometers of mines, and they're usually in remote regions where food is very difficult and expensive to produce. So the idea that you could grow strawberries during the winter at a constant temperature, because most of these mines are at 25 degrees Celsius. So you wouldn't have to pay for heating. You just have to bring lighting. And they're already located across Canada. And you wouldn't have to deal with the effects of climate change or pests underground. So that's an exciting one. Another one is focused on the production of high bush blueberries and using plant genetics and production system innovations to solve the challenge of year round production of blueberries in Canada. They are specific working to develop more plant varieties that are more suited to indoor environments such as greenhouses to produce the highest production volume and best quality. We've had one suggestion of when fish are grown, they throw off a lot of heat, and using that heat to be captured to produce produce is a very interesting and exciting idea. And then another one is focused on the actual cultivation system in greenhouses and changing the way that greenhouses are laid out, rearranging the lighting and heating systems to produce a more cost effective growing system.
It's interesting because the ideas that you've come up with, that mine may be the exception to this, but it's not about developing a brand new system starting from scratch. Those others are about adapting something that we already do.
Exactly. And sometimes those are where the best innovations come from. It's from tweaking an existing system or taking an idea that works very well in a completely different setting and bringing it into food production and testing it there. So it's exciting that, for example, using artificial intelligence is one way that we hope that innovations will be brought to bear in the food space.
I'm looking forward to hearing more about this as we go down the road. And the integration of ideas is the fascinating part here, where it's not just one idea that makes us successful, but it's a group of ideas. And as you mentioned before, collaboration from a group of very diverse individuals. You mentioned before that you're still looking for people to become involved in this. How do they go about getting involved?
So, first of all, I'm going to direct your listeners to go to our website, which is homegrownchallenge.ca. And there you can find more specific details about the challenge, the deadlines, and who our judges are. And if you have any questions, we have a team that's ready to answer them, and you can reach them at challenge@westonfoundation.ca. But those are the two best points of contact to learn more about the challenge.
That's awesome. Tamara, it's been great talking to you. I look forward to hearing what the results are from the challenge sometime in the future.
Thanks very much, Mike. It's been my pleasure.
For many of the youth in rural Ontario, it's been a rite of passage. When you get to a certain age, you join junior farmers. Join me next time when I speak to Megan McLeod, the Communications Director with Junior Farmers Association of Ontario, and we'll talk about what junior farmers have been up to these days. That's next time on The Back 40. You've been listening to The Back 40, brought to you by Trillium Mutual Insurance. Be sure to subscribe to The Back 40 wherever you find your favorite podcasts so that you don't miss an episode. The Back 40, bringing the ag community together one podcast at a time. I'm Mike Brine. Until next time, take care and stay safe.